From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Hi, my name is Larry Applebaum from the Music Division here at the Library of Congress, and I'm pleased to say joining us is composer, arranger, band leader, Maria Schneider. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you.
Yeah, we spent some time this morning going through some treasures in the collection, jazz and otherwise. I want you to tell our viewers what made an impression on you, what resonated, what moved you?
It's just, for me, I love seeing what a composer puts to paper, seeing what their process is, imagining the thought, it going down on the paper. And you know, for years, I was a music copyist, and I still write in pen and pencil, and I always enjoyed the seeing maybe even the speed and the confidence which you can see somebody put down their ideas, or the Bartók we looked at today, where you could see actually, you know, he was making his own bar lines down in the score and everything, and you said he did it from the hospital, writing a concerto for orchestra.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just fun, and I enjoyed also seeing some of the letters, because I am one of those people that's very interested in the person and the relationships and everything that makes up who they are as a musician. I never think, even in my own music, I don't think of writing music as music. To me, music is a conduit for life, and so knowing, and the fact that you have these archives and knowing a little bit about these people's lives through letters and things like that just enriches it. It's amazing.
When's the last time you wrote a letter?
An actual handwritten letter? I send postcards and letters still.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I mean, mostly email, but if there's somebody I really want to write something to, I'll still put it in a postcard or a card. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the Bartók. That was a commission. Mm-hmm. It was from the mid-1940s. I think 1943, he finished it. You've undertaken a commission for the library's concert this week. I want you to tell us a little bit about that commission. Have you finished it?
Yes, I finished it. Although you know, we're rehearsing, and for me, Peter Sellers, years ago, Peter Sellers commissioned me to write something for my band.
The director.
Yes, yeah, the director, yes, for the Mozart Festival in Vienna. And I wrote a piece that actually we're going to close our concert with, called Cerulean Skies. And when we premiered it, you know, I was there, you know, it's always a little bit of a work in progress. So, you know, I always end up doing editing. So, and he said, Maria, the premiere is never quite, you know, where it's going to be. It's the first act, and then you do. And so I hope we're going to be okay, you know, but it's scary, because I did something that's a little bit unusual. It has different kinds of gestures and rhythmic things that the band is playing that I am just indicating with my body. The piece is called Data Lords, and it's a piece that's about this seduction of all of us through actually the use of music and video and all these things that that corporations like YouTube and Google use to draw eyeballs so that they can gather data and turn it into money. And these big data companies, I see them that they are now like data lords, and we are kind of the serfdom, and it's just taking so much. It's literally just sucking the life out of our economy, our music economy, and also out of I think a certain. It's the total opposite of what we did today. That thing of looking at the real thing, the pencil to the paper, the thing that the person made, as opposed to this sort of plasticized, digitized thing that just is churned out. It's like force feeding, you know, yourself at the the trough or something like at the fast food. I mean, that's how people are getting their music. And so it's this idea that we're all just giving this away, and this intelligence of this thing, because of all this data, is getting bigger and bigger. And they know that there is a point at which that intelligence will become more than ours, that it will know more. We're already at the point where that data turns into knowledge about people and disease or certain things, and they don't even really understand what those things are, but that they can predict things because of all that data. So anyway, this is a piece that has, I don't know if you'd call it some beauty, but seduction, but then it kind of overtakes you. So there's these gestures of the band doing like da 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 da, so we're still getting that, it's a little bit of a dance. So hopefully we'll be well and prepared. It's a little intimidating when you say the Bartok's Concerto for Orchestra was commissioned by the Library of Congress.
Well, it's all music.
Yes, well, that it is.
Yes. So in an era of data lords, what happens to artists' rights?
Oh, well, there's been this kind of wholesale idea fed to artists, which artists have bought into for decades and decades, that exposure at all costs. I don't really care what the contract says. I don't really understand it. I just want to get my music out there. And so, of course, something like YouTube uses that. Hey, look at all the exposure you're going to get. So, so we've so completely overexposed ourselves. And then they've now created this culture. They make it so easy to put things up, difficult to take it down, impossible to take it down effectively. Google, you can't keep up with the BitTorrenting and, the torrent sites and all these things. And so they purposely don't ask questions when you upload it. When you take it down, you get asked all sorts of questions. And so what was your question again? I forgot. What was the...
Oh, about artists' rights.
Oh, the artists' rights.
Age of data lords.
So there are no rights there. I mean, there's no law holding them accountable for inducing this infringement. They monetize it through ads. It doesn't come to the musicians. And it's there's such an erosion of rights. I mean, most artists that I know now are telling me that their royalties and things from their various sources are about 10% of what they were. And it is that bad. It is really that bad. So,
Is it impacting you directly?
Well, in different ways. I noticed the impact definitely on my performance royalties, like because now what's happening, it used to be that music had a value. Music had a value. We said, it costs this much to make music, make a record. We're going to price this record at such and such. This is what it costs.
So does this impact you directly?
It's impacted me in a very big way, and it's shaped the way I do things now. So one of the things that are going on is that it used to be that people set their price, like this shirt, what does it cost for the materials? What does it cost to make it? The store that buys the shirt pays that to the manufacturer, the designer, all those things, and then sells the shirt. When you buy the shirt, they're pricing according to what they have to pay for that shirt. So now in the music business with streaming and everything, what's happening, and the government is setting some of these standards, it just, to me, it does not make sense at all. They are paying musicians for the music. They're paying for the music. The creator, the performers, everything are being paid according to a percentage of the net profit of a company, what they say their profit is or isn't. So a company like Spotify is paying, saying, well, this is all the money we have to divvy out, so you get 0.0007 cents for a stream, where, I mean, that's just insanity, because I know what it costs to produce a record. For me to produce one of my records costs about $200,000. You're never going to pay for that streaming. You're never going to pay through any of these things. So years ago, already in 2003, just when the file sharing thing was starting, before anybody talked about crowdfunding, fan funding, it didn't exist. It was invented by this guy, Brian Camilio, who started ArtistShare. And he came to me one day because he knew I was frustrated already with the record model, which also had historically has had very, askewed ways of calculating recoupment. It's always been like that. It's like a credit card company. You can never really get ahead of that credit card debt, and that's how they treated, the price of making a record. So this guy came to me and said, and this is what we discussed today, looking at the archive. The archive, your archive shows process and shows the creative process. So Brian said to me this day, he said, I came up with an incredible idea. He said, what's the one thing nobody can file share? I said, I don't know. Seems they can file share anything. He said, the creative process. He said, I'm going to design a website where you can say to people, hey, pre-order, we can bring in people on different levels, fan funding, he called it fan funding. People called it crowdfunding, but we just sort of privately were doing this. So Brian said, I'll call it fan funding, and we will get people to pre-order, and we will, through my site, document the process, show your creative process, video of how you write, putting up sketches, so that people can download them and have access to that, so that the fan feels like they're getting more than just getting a record. They can't get that when they just file share something. And it's developing this relationship. On top of it, I am setting my own price. And here's the thing that gets away from the data lord thing. Data lords own all the data. Nobody else does. We just give it away for the convenience and the joy of gorging ourselves in all this music that we take in so much that we don't even really take it in anymore. In the case of this, I'm setting my own price. I know what it costs, and I'm making the lion's share of gross without all these. So I've been doing this now and developing a fan base and an archive, a massive archive of interviews, and I go back and look at me talking about my creative process for a commission I did, through my website years ago, and I'm like, oh wow, yeah, I went through that too. Yeah, that thing I'm talking about with data lords, oh yeah, I was really scared for that premiere too, and so it's even fun for me to see my own process. So it's my own little mini at-home ArtistShare Library of Congress. And so that has largely, for me, it's largely protected me. And I wish every artist would do that, because this business out there, like the streaming and everything, they are nothing. They are absolutely nothing without the music. If musicians didn't give away the rights, if they didn't sign, and if they weren't signed on with these companies that have now joined the data lords. So, the biggest record companies like Universal, Warner, Sony, they all took equity in Spotify. Well, Spotify is not in the music business. Spotify is in the data business. So they use music as the carrot to draw the eyeballs, to gather the data, to get the advertising, I forget, I have to ask somebody, there's a statistic of the vast, vast majority of their employees are data analytics scientists. They're not in the music business. So this is kind of what we're all up against. And if musicians said, no, I'm taking it back, they would crumble. They would crumble. The only ones maybe that wouldn't is YouTube, that somehow, the government kind of seems so far, hopefully they're going to change the safe harbor provision of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Maybe that's going to get changed, and they'll start saying, hey, if you induce this infringement, if you're basically like a drug pusher on the street, just one, just put up one little video,
First one's free.
Yeah, first one's free. And it is kind of that bad. They have this Copyright Basics video that is just like, it's it's unthinkably bad. It's ridiculous. So anyway, we'll see what happens, but no one can count on government. I have to tell you one thing. A group of us in New York started something called Music Answers, musicanswers.org. It's grassroots, and our idea was that we want to start educating musicians to these issues, waking them up. It's like, hey, folks, for a century now, we've all been sleeping, and now, the alarm bells were going off before. Now it's like out of control. Time to wake up, know what's going on. We could have examples up of everything that should always be in a publishing contract, everything that should never be in a publishing contract, everything that should always be in a record contract. And we're getting all these endorsers, everybody from all over the music business, everybody from Carole King to Herbie Hancock to Steve Reich, to students, so that everybody says, hey, you know what? What we do is an asset. And what I have to tell you, just to tell you a little bit about the public. So we had a concert the other night, and my band, these players, they're just so extraordinary. It's a lifetime of obsession to become a player like these guys play. Every day, the investment in the time, the self-criticism, the study, it's incredible. What they represent is unbelievable. So we did a concert, and the audience loved it. Standing ovation afterwards. This woman, we had a reception, and this woman, and I think she was one of the people that helped give money to the concert. So a wonderful woman comes up to Scott Robinson, and she said, that was just marvelous. My friends and I sat there, and we had the best time trying to figure out what all of your professions were. And one of the guys was sitting next to Scott, and he said, he was standing there, he said, he's a mad scientist. And she said, I thought you were a scientist. And Scott was just like, wow. He said, lady, you just made my journal. But this idea that people have out there that music is just something, it just sort of comes, and we just kind of do it on the side, and then I guess the rest of the time we're doing something else. I guess people just don't realize that it requires more dedication than anything else can,
And commitment.
Commitment and love.
Think of all the musicians in your orchestra, many of whom have been with you for 25 years.
Yeah.
That's a serious undertaking.
Yeah.
You invest time, resources, and it's worth it, because look what comes out the other end.
Yeah. An evolution of something that you could never force and put, all this music has evolved slowly over time. The sound of the band, that's kind of what I'm talking about too with premieres and everything. All these things, they have a process. And the longer, George Wein, I had dinner with him not that long ago, and he was saying, Maria, he said, you're one of the few musicians that sticks together with a group. And he said, nobody does that anymore. And he said, that's why it's got that sound and everybody develops. And in jazz, what's so great is when you have that, then you have that trust. Everybody knows each other so well. And what that means is then you can take more risks. Because when you play, you can throw something out there and everybody knows, everybody has each other's back and knows, and they know my music so well that they know kind of the outer limit. They compress it to see if they can still create the overall sense of inevitability, and that's what I'm always looking for in a piece, that the whole thing has a sense of inevitability, but it is filled with surprise and for all of us, and the unexpected risk-taking. And that's the benefit of having musicians you work with that long, you get that.
It's intriguing to note the dedication and commitment of your musicians to the orchestra, but there's also a level of dedication and commitment on the part of the audience to investing in your process.
Yeah.
And they feel finally that it's not some corporate entity who's giving them or selling them a commercial product.
Yes.
They actually feel a part of that process.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we did our first project, the first Artist Share project, it was my record Concert in the Garden, which to this day is the record that maybe most kind of hits my heart. There were a lot of things about that record that were powerful switchovers for me. And then add to it the artist share thing, you know, and we won a Grammy, and it was the first Grammy that was won by somebody only selling on the internet, and we didn't even realize it to say it at the time because it was so early. We almost didn't even really know what we had started, but it was the first fan-funded Grammy. I'm absolutely sure of it. So, you know, that record, after that won a Grammy, I started getting all these emails from people saying, you know, it's crazy, but I feel really proud of this. And I know I wasn't part of the music, but somehow I felt like I was. And that is what we wanted, is that everybody, they felt like, and when I made that record, even in the graphics on one of the booklets, I had the names of all the high participants mixed in with the players on the band, as if to say, we are all this music together. We all make this together. We cannot do this alone. And yeah, most of those people still are coming back and commissioning works through the site, and it's great. And as an artist, it also feels really good to be supported that way. It is like the old patron thing a little bit too. It's nice.
So if it's a model that works, why don't more people join?
I think that for a lot of musicians, for a long time, there was this ego attachment. There was one, I remember David Sanborn talking to me about it. It's the ego attachment to that record label name. You know, I'm on Warner. Maybe there was something to that. And I think the idea of doing these things, you know, doing the documentation, but I think more and more people now are realizing as everything, you know, it's like, have you ever watched a spider suck the life out of an insect in a web?
Not lately.
Well, I have. When I was a kid, we used to, every once in a while, we had a window, and I remember one night my sister was watching out the window, this spider, and so my mom got us all there, and I remember seeing that spider just suck the life, and that's the image I always get of what this is doing to musicians. Is just sucking the life out of them. I mean, the copyright report from the Office of Copyrights that they did going around studying, you know, how the DMCA is affecting people, and they said 80% of the songwriters in Nashville have quit. So this is like, you know, this is just an astounding figure. So I think as more and more people start to realize what they're giving away, they're going to realize that self-ownership is really key, and owning one's own data. I mean, people are just really behind. They're just starting to wake up. And I've noticed, I mean, Brian was just way ahead of his time. I think that's the main thing, but I think people are waking up, and I think it is going to start to happen. He just started something called Fan Funded. It's going to be like for the masses. It's kind of like Artist Share, a little, you know, but a little easier and not requiring quite so much. Doesn't give quite the benefit that I have, but I am hoping that more and more people are going to do this. I love the idea about the music industry basically being the music industry, you know, being the people that make it and owning our own stuff and taking control again. It's this, I don't know, it could really, there could be a critical mass changeover that could really change things for the better. And requiring transparency. Transparency is so key.
Have you noticed any movement to address some of these inequities in higher education? For example, musicians learn they become trained in how to play music. Most of them take some kind of business of music course. But I wonder, as more and more musicians graduate from these schools, from conservatories, how aware are they in some of these issues, and how well do they know that there's a choice for them?
Not aware enough. I mean, that is one of the things that I brought to the table with Music Answers, is I said, this has to be as much about the young student musician as it is about the professional, because they're the ones that really have been kind of brainwashed that this is just really cool to put up all your favorite music on a channel, and you're somehow YouTube channel, and you're somehow helping everybody and yourself, and they don't realize that they've been taught to cannibalize themselves and they're cannibalizing themselves for somebody else's gain, and they don't even realize it. And those things are not taught. They're still teaching. Some people are, so some schools are, but mainly, they're teaching kind of the old business and a little bit about the social media and all that stuff. And my goal is to wake everybody up and I've been starting to write to deans and say, will you send this to we want every faculty member and every student at your school to endorse this and start watching, and we're into educating them about what's really going on, the things that people do not know and are not awake to. So that's tops on my agenda for what I want to do.
I loved hearing this image you cite about the spider sucking the life. It's not so much the sucking part. It's that that's an image from your childhood that has stayed with you all these years. And so for people who know about your music and they listen to your recordings, but they may not know that much about you personally and your background. You grew up in Windham, Minnesota?
Southwest Minnesota.
And is that prairie land?
It's prairie land, it's farmland. There's some native prairie there left, very little patches, beautiful wide open landscape, flat, far as the eye can see, beautiful.
And does that impact, or in what way does that impact your aesthetic or your artistic identity?
It's so amazing. It's like as you're coming up and you're doing things, you don't realize what's impacting you, and then you look back and you start to see. And first of all, when I was a kid, I loved Aaron Copland, and I think there was something, not the modern Aaron Copland because I didn't know it. I knew more of the Appalachian Spring and but there was something about the openness of that I related to, the landscape of things. And I've always been, even earlier today, I was telling you about my piano teacher, this extraordinary teacher, Mrs. Butler, who had been a stride pianist in Chicago. She was married to one of the pianists from the Glenn Miller Band, her second husband. She was also a great classical pianist, and she was a great organist. Red hair with a face like Dizzy Gillespie, kind of. Very flamboyant, rhinestone-studded glasses, red hair, and wore muumuus. And, she was just an amazing, amazing woman. And my first lesson, she started teaching me theory. And she taught me to understand why the music I played felt the way it felt. So the 1-4-5 chord would be, here we go up the hill, back again home, to show the 4 going up, the 5 bringing you back home is tonic. She had, before that, it was bright the day with a major triad, dark the night with a minor triad. So I've always equated maybe the visual to the music, and much of my music has been about something. And I don't set out to write about something. It's that I start writing, and before I know it, I'm on top of the silo at the Thompson Farm in Windham, Minnesota, and I'm seeing those beans, and I'm like, oh my God, that feels like that. Maybe it's a way to bring back memory and freeze it into a new form that I can relive it. It might be that. It might be, because I love it, like if my band plays and whatever it was that was going into that music, like I say, the idea, usually when the idea first comes, it's just a musical idea. Then it attaches a lot of times itself to a memory or an idea or something. And what I love is in the end, when the band plays that and I'm standing there conducting it, and all that imagery is coming to me, to the point sometimes where it makes me cry. I'm like, wow, I am there. It's just such a powerful attraction to that moment. And I don't know why that's how it clicks for me in my head, but it does.
I assumed that you would need to have a detachment in order to pay all attention to detail in performance. And yet, I'm hearing that you get caught up in it,
Oh, yeah.
just as the audience does.
Very much, very much. I mean, I am definitely, detail, cut off this breath, oh, that's a little out of tune, look at somebody or, want a little more trumpets, can you play that a little smoother? There's always that going on. But there are moments that when it's happening, you just get lost in it. You just say, oh, yeah, definitely.
Did you study conducting, or is this something that happens naturally?
I studied a little bit. I took some lessons in Minnesota undergrad, some classes with the conducting teacher at Eastman. The poor man, Donald Hunsberger, he was charged with teaching all the jazz musicians how to conduct,
Poor man.
poor man. But it was funny, recently I had to conduct, a few years back, I had to conduct the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra. And I called him up, I said, Don, can I, it's years, decades later, Don, can I come up and have a little conducting lesson? Can we talk about this piece? And he was just very sweet about it. But, conducting my band is something that just evolved. And what happened is, my band's playing, and I would just, you don't need to conduct a big band in the same, you need some of that technique, because there are always moments where you need, the little break, the lift, the rubato, this and that. So you need conducting technique, but it's not the same as in an orchestra where the conductor is kind of the time. You've got a rhythm section usually, there's something keeping time. For me, with my band, it's more about giving them the picture, because the trumpets are back there, they're not really hearing the reeds, everybody's kind of separate. I see myself as a focal point to keep them focused on where the music is, so they don't just get in their part trying and go into autoplay, but because they're not maybe hearing the picture so well, because it's that I'm that picture and I'm letting them know, is this feeling right? They can see it in my body, and if something isn't, and I kind of look at them and I go like that, then they get it. So for me, it's more about sculpting this thing so that it is emotional, that it is not just technically, yes, I want it technically right, because that also helps bring out the emotion, but bringing out the right crescendo flavor, all just the little things that are going to make me feel like I'm on that silo, as opposed to that it's a good sounding piece of music.
Mm-hmm. I've no doubt that you've seen it. In fact, many of the viewers of this will have seen it. But in 1959, CBS broadcast something called The Sound of Miles, or The Sound of Miles Davis. So it's Miles with his quintet, and then there's an orchestra led by Gil Evans, and they did some of their collaborations. And I love watching Gil conduct. He's like a big bird.
Yeah, the kind of long hands and the arms,
Yeah.
and it's there's something about Gil. Yeah, just his movement.
We should talk a little bit about Gil, because along with Bob Brookmeyer, Gil Evans is the musician, arranger, composer who you're often associated with. I love the story about how you first came to meet Gil.
Yeah.
Will you tell it?
Yeah, so I was a music copyist in New York.
Well, by the way, what does that mean, a music copyist?
Okay, so before computers, back when we were young, there was something called pen and ink, and so the composer makes the score, and somebody has to make all those individual parts for all the players, and that calligraphy is a real art. And thank God I had a wonderful teacher, great composer, Dominic Argento, back at the University of Minnesota, and he taught me orchestration, great orchestration teacher, wow, brilliant. And all our orchestration exercises he made us do in calligraphy pen. And he said, because that's just a skill I want you to learn to do. Well, it was so fantastic, because by the time I left Eastman and I wanted to move to New York, I had a skill. And so there's these music copying offices, we looked at one of the things today, it was a...
Charlap?
Yeah, not Bill Charlap, Emil Charlap. Was it a Brookmeyer score? And,
Yeah.
and on the bottom of the page, I said, I want to see who copied this. And it was Emil Charlap. So his office was right around the corner, all in Midtown. And that in that office at one time, you know, all the arrangers sat there, the copyists. It was a music production. You know, they had somebody, Ray Charles, making a record or something. They were sitting there all writing these arrangements.
It's like a factory or an assembly
Well, that
line.
whole area was like that. The Brill.
Yeah.
Have you read that book, The Brill Building?
Yeah.
The book about music in the air or whatever. It's just there was a time there. Wow, it must have been amazing. So
you came at the tail end of that time.
well, yeah, I would say a little past the tail end, but there were still 1985. There were still music copying offices, and so I got a job in one, and I also ran these big. You know, they had these huge Xerox machines for the big scores. I miss all that stuff, you know. And the machine you could put the parts through, like if you were doing a long, like 3-page part, you could, then you just have to fold it. You didn't have to print all the individual pages. It was amazing. So one day this composer, Tom Pearson, came in, wanted me to print a score for him. It was kind of a dense classical thing. And he, and I got talking, and I was really starved for conversation about music. I'd left Eastman, you know, every night at dinner we're talking, and now I live in New York, and all that community of minds always churning out over music, you know, I just wasn't with that. So I think he and I got together for lunch. After that, I was on my way out to mail something, anyway, we got talking, and he asked me who my favorite writers were, and I started talking about Gil. And he just listened, and then we went to a Penderecki concert, I remember, but that night he was talking about Penderecki. He didn't even mention much about Gil. And then he called me and he said, I didn't tell you today, but Gil happens to be like my closest friend. And I called him and I told him about you, and he needs somebody to do some work for him. And what's crazy about it is I was so into Gil, and Gil was the one that really, Gil and Brookmeyer, well, so many of them made me want to be a jazz composer, but it really largely, the reason Gil and Bob were so powerful for me that way was that Gil had, it's big band music, it's jazz, you know, but it had all that transparency, the nuance, the stuff starting with the Claude Thornhill. We looked at the Arab dance score from the Claude Thornhill. That music, you know, back then, you know, it's like big bands were like this thing, and then it's got this airy sound, and mixing it with classical, and I love that. And then Bob Brookmeyer had the thing of the long forms, you know, forms that you find in classical music. So that bringing together, so it wasn't just this definable jazz thing, you know. So I was, way back then, this is before I even went to Eastman or moved to New York, one night I was sitting on the couch and I was listening to Svengali, and I was looking at the picture of Gil on the Priestess album. And I had this whole vision, like literally it just kind of came to me, of working for Gil. So when that whole thing happened to me, I was like, this is just freaky. It was, and the first time I saw him, I met him, it was some rehearsal studio. He said, come to the rehearsal studio, I'll meet you, they were rehearsing and he wanted me to copy some things. He came with like a little sketch this big, this little King Brand music with the whole score on each line. You know, all the little notes, you know, that made up the entire, so I'd have to I was like, wow, okay, this is a different kind of copy job, you know. But when I first met him, he came walking towards me. I was so excited and freaked out that it's like my whole field of vision went just haywire, and he was like flying around the room almost. I had to literally like put my hand out and shut my eyes because I couldn't take it in. He was almost like a you know, like a shamanistic sort of experience of, you know, somebody. And if ever there was somebody who was probably a musical shaman, that would be Gil.
Of his music, what has the sort of dearest place in your heart?
Oh, wow. It's been different pieces. Hard to say. The Barbara song.
From the individualism?
The individualism of Gil Evans is, you know, that sound of the flute, and And the way I couldn't believe it. It was only years later that I heard the original Barbara song and how fast it moves and
Kurt Weill.
Yeah, Kurt Weill, you know, it's like, and the words are something very strange, and Gil just recomposed it into this long, haunting thing. So I think that one for me maybe has the most magic, but then there's so much stuff. Oh boy, I don't know. God, there's so many. One of the great Gil Evans arrangements Ryan Truesdell did on his new album, it was How About You? And that one he heard about from Brookmeyer. He knew to look for it and start digging to find this thing, because Bob Brookmeyer said, years ago I played a rehearsal for the Thornhill Band. Gil came in with this arrangement of How About You, and it was just crazy great. And it was never recorded, and he ended up digging that out. That thing is amazing. Oh my gosh.
I love Gil's arrangements for singers.
Oh yeah.
And I know you've used Luciana Souza,
Mm-hmm.
among others, with your orchestra. How do you feel about writing for voices?
I love it. I love it. Yeah, if it takes forever, with Astrid Gilberto, that arrangement he did is so beautiful. You know, I wrote for Dawn Upshaw.
Oh, that's right.
So I wrote for Luciana. Started because I wanted that human element. On a piece that was on Concert in the Garden, the Bullerias, and she sang, and she was so beautiful at making her voice like an instrument and mixing in, but then you've got that human thing. So I started using that in my music with Luciana, just on recording. We didn't do it much live, because having a singer with a big band in that kind of context live from an engineering standpoint is just a nightmare. She doesn't hear herself enough, or or somebody mixes it too loud. And so it's not something I do live very much. But years later, then Dawn Upshaw comes to me and wants me to commission her. And that started for the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra. I did a thing called Carlos Drummond de Andrade Stories. And then she asked for another one, and I did a suite of 9 Ted Kooser songs. Ted Kooser was just my favorite poet. I just love him. He lives in Lincoln, Nebraska. Poet laureate, U.S. Poet laureate, Pulitzer Prize winner. And I did 9 of his poems from his book, Winter Morning Walks, 100 Postcards to Jim Harrison. And what I found was so wonderful, especially in doing the Kooser stuff, because that poetry I related to so much. It's very Midwestern. It's very plain spoken, but profoundly beautiful. And what I discovered is, I've been writing instrumental music for so many years. You're pulling every idea, and if there is that story, and everything's coming out of you. Suddenly, when I was working with this poetry, the poetry was giving me the imagery. The poetry was giving me the rhythm of the words, and even hinting at where that melody would want to go. So it was almost like somebody taking my hand and saying, okay, this is the basic outline, this is the sketch. I don't know, it made it, I don't want to say the word is easy, but it made it less effortful, or something. There was just something about it that it just came. It felt like somebody just giving you a little boost into a direction, and I love that music. And music is very close to my heart. One of the pieces when I was coming here last night, one of them came up on my iPod, and it was "Spring, the sky rippled with geese, but the green comes on slowly, time to the ticking of downspouts. The pond still numb from months of ice reflects just one enthusiast this morning, a budding maple whose every twig is strung with beads of carved cinnabar, bittersweet red." And I had done that song, and it was playing, and I just thought this time of year is so perfect for that, and I was just like, I love that. And it's easy to love it, because it's not only my music, it's music I would have never written if it wasn't for Ted.
Did you discuss it with Ted? I
got permission, of course. And
by the way, how does that work? you have an agent who does it for you,
No,
or do you
no,
literally
no,
pick
I-
up the phone?
I found him through the internet and wrote him. I was just terrified. You never know what kind of person,
Exactly.
you know.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure, artists, writers, whatever, they can be anything from open to the prickliest things on the planet. You know, it can be everything, right?
But usually, if you're sincere, they will at least hear you out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he was very open. I think he had,
Did he know who you were?
no, and I think he had no real expectation, you know, of anything. And then, and I didn't keep, he isn't much into traveling. He does it here and there, but not a lot. So I invited him to come to the premiere in Ojai, and he didn't much want to go. And then I didn't have him hear it until I finished the record, and I sent it to him. And I was so scared because, first of all, these poems, this book, I don't know if you know about this book, but he wrote those poems. He was recovering from cancer treatment, and he couldn't be in the light, so he started going on these early morning walks. And he was very depressed, and he wasn't writing. And then one morning, he went on a walk. He tells this story at the beginning of the book. He came back from a walk, and he wrote down a poem, and he put it on a postcard, sent it to Jim Harrison, his friend. And then the next day, and it kind of, I think, probably became a little bit of his lifeline and brought him back, you know, writing these poems. So one of them that's my favorite maybe that I used was walking by flashlight at 6 in the morning, my circle of light on the gravel swinging side to side, coyote, raccoon, field mouse, sparrow, each watching from darkness this man with the moon on a leash. So, you know, it's just such beautiful imagery. And so I was so scared for him to hear the music because I knew that these poems were so, for him, you know, they had to be so close to his heart, you know. I'm sure all his poetry is, but I was just terrified. And I got up one morning early, you know, and I glanced up because I just sent it. I FedExed it to him. And there was an email from him, and he just loved it. It was this long email, and it was just so, and I remember I was so beautiful. I mean, I was so moved that he thought it was beautiful that I started to cry. And I went back to bed. I said to Mark, he likes it, he likes it. Yeah, I'm going to cry now because I was so relieved because I love that poetry so much. So, you know, it's scary to put somebody's words to music, and it's a responsibility. And
Has anyone used your music or repurposed it for something else?
a few people have rearranged it and made it into things. One of the most beautiful, you're not even going to believe this, because one day the guy who handles my publishing, you know, administration, he said there's a drum and bugle corps that wants to do a version of Sky Blue. Huh. Sky Blue is this ballad of mine. I thought, drum and bugle portion, but I was like, okay, whatever, you know. It was kind of like Ted, you know, probably the low expectation, you know, and they sent me a video of this thing. It is one of the most moving, beautiful arrangements. It's so beautiful. It's beyond. And they had videos of the kids singing all the parts, you know, in preparation. They were all singing. Then they showed them just standing there and playing. And then they showed them on the field, and they all had these spandex light blue. You might be able to find, I don't know if they have a website where they show that, but blue t-shirt, blue spandex shirts with clouds, and it was a group called the Blue Coats, and it was beautiful. And some people have made small group versions. Torben Waldorf of Choro Danzado. I mean, my music is so kind of frozen into a shape that is, you know, it's not like a tune, you know, that you easily just kind of turn into something else. So when somebody does it, it's kind of a notable thing. So it doesn't happen a lot.
Now, do people who may, you know, let's say an ensemble somewhere, who might want to perform some of your works, do they have access to the music?
Yes, I
Through
sell.
your publishing?
I self-publish my music all through ArtistShare. So it's so everybody, and so what we do is, yeah, people can buy the scores and parts, and then we include a video of me talking about how I conduct it. I include videos of guys in my band talking about how they approach playing the solos or maybe the comping, or depending. Each one has different videos. And we also do a thing on my last recordings. Well, you know a lot about engineering, so everything's recorded multi-track, and with the soloists are always in a soundproof booth, or usually they have been on my last records. And so we make a version with the soloist mixed out, and then I put with that, so then I can include that so that the student soloist can practice along with my band. So all those kinds of things are, yeah, I've figured out a way to share and publish and do everything I can through that website.
Can I assume that when you write, you often write with specific people in mind?
Absolutely.
In your orchestra? Can
Yeah.
you give us an example of how you might write for a specific soloist?
I don't think I can give you an example, and I'll tell you why. So people always say this about Ellington.
Yeah.
It's probably the most talked about aspect of Ellington. He wrote for his players, and what I would say about that is that if you work with people night after night and year after year, you can't help but do that. You have a way of relating and taking them in with what you put out. And it's very much like conversation. You're talking to me one way. If your mother was sitting here, you'd talk to her a different way. If your closest friend was sitting here, you'd maybe have a highly inappropriate conversation about something. You know,
We could do that.
Who knows what
Yeah.
what it would be. And so it's the same thing, you know, it's just your gut makes you do something. So I don't know if I can put it into words. And maybe sometimes, now, though I think I really write for my soloists and am tuned into what they do, I also know that sometimes maybe I kind of typecast them because I have an idea in my head about who they are, and sometimes for fun, you know, we'll be on a tour and I'll switch around solos to shake things up, and it's like, okay, let's give this to this person tonight or whatever. And an instrument and a person that I never imagined playing a certain solo will do it, and all of a sudden it turns it into something that I just never imagined that I love. And so, yeah, to say an example of how I do it. Well, Scott Robinson, let's pick Scott. Scott can do so many things with his instrument, and he is somebody who is coming from a deep respect of everything very traditional all the way to Sun Ra and beyond, you know. So he's got this wide scope. So with Scott, you know that you can do things that don't just require, you know, fitting in a really beautiful melodic way to a harmonic thing, but that can go kind of creatively beyond into sort of a sonic spectrum. I mean, there's that, but then also kind of knowing too where his heart can go as a musician too, what he can get into and what he might not get into. So I try to hit that. For me, the hardest part with the guys in this stuff is when we're rehearsing and trying to describe to them in rehearsal what I want so that we can get it to a certain point so that then they get it, and then now they can take it to their own point. But that first initial thing of, no, can you try it this way? Can you do that? You know, it can be very antithetical to creativity, but you have to just kind of muscle it into some sort of understanding, and then the thing frees up, and then they take it someplace I don't know, I wasn't expecting.
There are some very creative people in your orchestra.
Oh, yeah.
Because you mentioned Scott. he not only has this wide palette of what he's likely to do as a creator, but he also has all these instruments
Yeah.
that he can create on.
Yes.
And I wonder if you ever write for contrabass saxophone.
Yes.
You do?
Yeah, sometimes.
Okay.
Well, you know what? If I do that, well, contrabass clarinet is in the Bullerias. I generally don't do it as I do it as this could possibly be played on this also, because getting a contrabass saxophone on an airplane, or, there are practicalities that you have to
Indeed.
deal. So we'll experiment with those things, and contrabass trombone, George Flynn. But I love when Scott brings out these wild instruments, and plays things. I love it, and the audience loves it, and it's just so high.
It's visually interesting also.
Yeah, yeah.
To watch your orchestra. I suppose I should ask you about your brush with one of the most famous, let's say, rock icons, and that's David Bowie at the end of his life. Why don't you talk a little bit about what that experience meant to you and how it played out?
Well, I'll tell you, in the biggest way, how it's played. This piece that I wrote for you, for the Library of Congress, would not have been written if it weren't for David Bowie.
Really? How so?
There is no question about that. Well, so he came to me about working on this song that he had started. He came with a little recording of something he had put together. It was the beginnings of something, but it wasn't developed into this long thing.
And he knew about you, or did you know
He
each
knew,
other
yeah.
already?
No, I'd never met him, but he had come to hear the band.
Got it.
And somebody had once written to me about, would you sign some CDs? I want to give them to David for his birthday. So I knew David liked my music, but he came to hear the band one night, and he was gone before I had a chance to say hi. And then out of the blue, I'd heard he was looking for me. So, and he called me about collaborating on this song together, and I was very, very nervous about it, because it's like David Bowie, and I just thought, what if I don't meet his expectation, or, so I kept saying to him, okay, you just have to promise me, if you don't like it, you can just say so, that's okay. I was just constantly doing that, and then once we decided we were going to go ahead, and I listened to the thing, and he was sitting there, and I heard it, and I went over to the piano, and I started playing around, and I said, so you want this to be dark? Because I said, this doesn't sound super dark to me. He said, I want it dark. And so I was playing around, and I said, okay. I said, I'll do it. I said, I think I hear it. I said, I don't want to say yes unless I feel like I can really bring something to it. Of course, who doesn't want to work with David Bowie? But I didn't want to work with David Bowie unless I felt like I was going to do something he was going to be happy with. So then I worked on some ideas, or we talked about a little bit. He left, and then he came back, and then I brought some ideas to the table. And then we started working together on it, and we met a few times, and we put together a little session. But somewhere in there, I was like, David, this is going to be really expensive. What we're doing is kind of a crazy thing. And what if it's not good? What if you don't like it? And he said, Maria, the plane goes down. He said, everybody walks away. So
Yeah.
And I'm a person who, I go on a crisis. When people call me to do a commission, many composers are happy. I'm like, oh God, no, not a commission, because I know that means I'm going to torture myself. I'm going to have several months of self-loathing.
Is
and
that
fear.
true?
Oh,
Are you really like this?
absolutely.
But that doesn't come from insecurity, does it?
Of course.
Really? I would not have
Deep-seated
imagined you as an insecure person.
Are you serious? Oh, yeah. When it comes to the writing and everything, oh yeah.
And
it's
every time.
I have. Every time I hear new music, I go in a crisis, and many times have been in tears at rehearsals, including yesterday.
Who'd have thought?
Yeah, it can happen to me. Yeah, I just get frustrated. It's hard for me to figure it all out every time. It is so.
But Bowie gave you some cues that said that, yes,
It's
he hears
okay.
it. Yeah.
So when I was writing this piece, and David liked my intense stuff. So he wanted this piece to be kind of like Sue. It ended up being called Sue or In a Season of Crime. He wanted this drum and bass, the fast kind of drums going under this thing. And this whole thing was just kind of this intense thing. And then I created this sort of rubato stuff over the top. Well, somehow that whole concept has just been in my head, and he liked my intense music. And as I started working on this idea, all of a sudden I just realized this is a continuation of David, and David would really love this piece. I know he would love this piece. It might not be quite fully formed. I may have to do some editing yet, but I think he would love what I'm doing. My assistant Marie, she was at the rehearsal, and when I was playing it, she said, "David would love this," and I said, "Yeah, I think he would," which makes me happy, you know. And so these gestures that I do in the ensemble, where the band just goes, the rhythm section's cooking along, and there's the soloist is going or whatever, and the band just starts going da 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 da. That's the kind of thing I don't know if I would have ever risked doing it. And when I threw it in front of my band, I just was just like, I'm just going to do this. The plane goes down, whatever. We do all walk away. You know, that's art. We take the risk, and we try it, and we see what happens. And so I did this piece with, even though I will tell you, yes, it's been stressful, I did it with more joy and more like throw it to the wind, see what happens than I would have because of him. And I kept having his face in my head of him just smiling, and that I still remember him looking, you know, just smiling, and just, and when we were recording, seeing his face through the glass and just smiling, just enjoying doing this thing with the band. He just, you know, he loved Kenton.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, and he loved jazz, and he loved big band music. And then his last album ended up being with Donnie.
Donnie McCaslin.
Yeah, he had wanted to do one more piece with me.
Yeah.
And we talked even about doing much more, but and I think we would have done much more.
Did you know at the time that he was dying?
No. But I didn't have time to do another piece because I was doing the Thompson Fields, my newest record. So, and I didn't even have time for Sue, but I did it, you know. But that summer was just so cramped and busy and stressful, and so I just said I just only have the time for one. But the other piece ended up becoming Lazarus, and I'm so glad that they did it. And I had said to him, when he was describing to me the whole drum and bass and the jazz and everything, I said, you have to listen to Donnie McCaslin. So I said, I pulled out, you know, the recordings I have. I said, listen to this. And he just loved it. I said, you should work with these guys. This would be amazing. This would be an unbelievable combination. And we went to hear Donnie, and Tony Visconti was there, his producer. And they ended up with Donnie's group doing that last album, which for me is one of the greatest albums David made. It's so beautiful. It is so evocative. I love it so much, but then I'm just wrecked after I listen to it. So then I can't listen to it. That last, the last song on that, oh my God, it's so beautiful. So if I love what David and I created together on Sue. I love it. I love the way he sings on it. I'm so happy with it. But even if all that had been was just to get him connected to Donnie to make that last record, I would have been like, wow, that might be musically one of the greatest things I ever did, is just being that, little arrow point for him. So
I'm glad you both did it.
yeah, it's who would think that you'd affect David Bowie's last musical project? I would have thought I'd be the last person on earth that would do that, but it just goes to show you how open musicians are, how open we are amongst ourselves, and what a beautiful world of collaboration. I mean, it is the greatest world to be a part of, and it's such a privilege, and there's so much talent, and there's so much hard work and creativity, and I think it's just going back to that other subject, the nasty subject before. I think that's why I make this whole advocacy thing such a huge part of my life, because it burns my butt when people not only take advantage of the financial aspects of people's lives. It's basically like reaching into somebody's 401k than saying, hey, I'm going to give out, a little $15, here, everybody take a little, and just pick away at it. It's not just that. It's eroding the whole culture of it. And it's going to affect the quality of the music. Because if the music can only then be made just by these massive record companies that are pushing these, teen wonders or whatever it is, just to make money and get a billion streams or whatever, and so many other musicians are just like, I can't swim amidst this, how can I have a family if I get a check for 3 cents or $30 even, and they say, I have millions of streams and I got, $17. I mean, it's like, come on, this is going to destroy things, and it makes me angry because it's an ecosystem. It's an amazing ecosystem, the music industry.
It's fascinating to hear you talk about it, because within you there's a kind of balance between the things that might arouse your passion and the gifts that you've been given in life. And the greatest thing is to find that balance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not easy.
Yeah.
Not easy.
I think we have time maybe for one last question.
Okay.
As a composer, as an arranger, band leader, all the other hyphens, all the other hats you wear, how do you measure success?
How do I measure success? I don't know. Success, to me, enjoying, loving what you do and feeling like it's growing and it's moving, because success kind of implies arrival. And an artist, I think you never feel like you arrive. Somebody said to me, "What does it feel good to get like where you are?" And I said, "No, actually not, because it's an infinite ways to go, and you're always a beginner on the next. There's always the next rung on the ladder, and maybe you get to a certain point of confidence and not proving yourself that makes some plateaus, but then there's always that next challenge. So success, I think if you ever even have the feeling of success, you sort of are done, so maybe success is never actually feeling success. I don't know.
A snake eating its tail.
Yeah.
Leah Schneider.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.